Good morning, all souls. Pastor Will here again. It is Thursday morning and it's early. As you can see behind me, it's still dark out. And God has a funny way of teaching me the lessons that He wants me to pass along. And so this morning, I woke up anxious, very anxious. Anxious about this disease spreading, anxious for the people in my life that I love who are most vulnerable. Those who are older, those who are already sick, those that are close to me, and I found myself battling anxiety. And as I did, and as I've been up praying, talking with God, He reminded me of something. It's connected to what we talked about yesterday, and that's the presence of God being the answer to this. He reminded me of a story in Matthew chapter 8. And that's the story of Jesus walking up to someone who battled a different infectious disease in his time. You see, this isn't the first time in our world's history that there was a virus, or in this case, a bacteria, that was passed from person to person that had tremendous effect on society, so much so that the people who were infected with it were quarantined into colonies. The bacteria that they didn't know was bacteria back then, they knew it simply as leprosy. Leprosy, what they thought was a skin disease, which was actually a central nervous system disease that showed up as big white spots, elevated spots on your skin, and that would get all flaky, and that actually would maybe gnarl your arms, and your nose would fall off, and your ear would get big, and you'd have twisted limbs, and they called it the claw hand, and there was no doubt that you had it, and that it would spread from person to person, and they thought that if you touched someone, you could give them the leprosy, and so they would segregate the lepers into a different corner of town, and nobody would go near them, and they were not to leave that leper colony. There were others who would bring food there and take care of them, but they were not to leave. And in Matthew chapter 8, you see this story of Jesus walking into town, and all of a sudden it says a leper came up to him. Right away, his audience would have known this leper was doing something wrong. He should not have been outside of that colony, outside of quarantine. He was not practicing social distancing like he should have. And when he comes up to Jesus, Jesus doesn't say to him, "Go away, you're going to get me sick." Jesus says to him, "What do you want?" And the leper says, "Lord, if you will, you can heal me." And then Jesus does something radical. He says, "I will." And he reaches out his hand and he touches the leper. He touches him. And the whole world that was watching this at the time caught their breath. They held their breath. Why? Because they're waiting for the leprosy to infect Jesus like it does everybody else who touches a leper. But instead, what they saw was the very reason why Jesus came. The leprosy does not infect Jesus. Jesus infects the leprosy. Jesus is the one, his life overpowers the leprosy, and immediately the leper is healed. Immediately the leper is healed. It's a story of exactly why Jesus came to walk the earth, and my friends, why it matters that we know him. For you see, Jesus didn't simply come to heal our diseases. If he did, then he would have just done that. There'd be no more diseases, and that would have been the end of the story. No, Jesus came to heal our diseases as a sign, as a window into understanding why he truly came, which includes our diseases. But he wanted to get at the root of why diseases are even here, the root that the Bible calls sin, this brokenness in our culture, in our world. It's why we have hurricanes. It's why we have diseases to begin with. It's also why relationships break down, sin. Jesus came to deal with that, which is precisely what he did on the cross. It's what he dealt with there, and he overcame there. Jesus came to step into our world, like we talked about yesterday, in order to provide the hope that we need in the face of every kind of disease, every kind of flood, every kind of situation where we feel overwhelmed, where the world is clearly broken. And this morning, I want to leave you with this image as encouragement to your heart as it was to mine. that the disease that everyone was afraid of, the disease that caused them to do social distancing and to quarantine, the disease that they thought was going to spread from person to person, was the very thing that Jesus came and overcame. He touched the leper, and the leper was infected with life. I believe Jesus is going to use and is using this coronavirus to come and touch our lives in a way that's way deeper than any virus. He wants us to know him and to trust him. And my prayer for you today is that you will know and see and trust that very Jesus as he steps into your life and this morning touches you, and says, hey, I'm here. Let's do this together. He is with you. I'm praying for you. Have a good day.